Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the joint meeting of the Ayer Select Board and the Ayer Finance Committee. This is the first FY 2024 Budget Public Forum, and today is Wednesday, January 25th, 2023. I would like to call to order the Select Board. Scott, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Okay. Sean?
Here.
All right, and the Select Board is present?
I could,
Kurt?
no,
Yes.
this is,
No, I need Kurt to call to order.
Oh,
Yeah.
you had said select board.
Yeah. So I need you to call your people together.
Okay. So for the finance committee then.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is Kurt Freskowski, chairman of the finance committee. We have Andrew Seeley has been logged in, and our member Sebastian Cordoba is having trouble with the Zoom, and I'm corresponding with him and will let us know when he is on. So we've got myself and Andrew Seeley from the finance committee on.
Actually, Kurt, Jin just joined.
And Jen.
Yeah.
So we also then have Jin Hong. So we have,
Sorry, I was just 1 minute late.
thank you, Jen.
Sure.
Okay. So then you have a quorum?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Well, unless there's any objections, I'm going to turn this over to Robert, town manager.
Madam Chair, members of the Select Board, members of the FinCom, members of the public, good evening, and welcome to the first public FY24 Budget Forum. I want to thank the Select Board and the FinCom for hosting this forum this evening. I also just want to thank Barbara Tierney, the Finance Manager, and Carly Antonellis, the Assistant Town Manager, for all of their efforts with this evening's presentation and support through the budget process. And I also want to recognize all of the town departments that are present and available to answer any questions that the Select Board, FinCom, or the public may have with respect to their departmental budgets. So before we jump into it, just a couple of things. As many know, but some who are new, the municipal budget is an ongoing process. So I want to stress the word process, that we are in the beginning of the formulation phase of the budget. Nothing is etched fully in stone, and there's a lot of work to do between now and April 24th, which is town meeting. So just want to stress again the ongoing process. This evening, it would be impossible, unless everybody wants to stay for the next 12 hours, it would be impossible to cover every topic and all of the intricacies of the municipal budget. So we're going to give, as we do in the first session, a general overview of the budget. We're going to be using draft 1 of the budget, which was sent to the FinCom and the Select Board and posted publicly on January 13th. I want to stress that's draft 1. It is subject to adjustments and changes as we move through the process. And there are also some estimates and placeholders, as there are every year, as we await more specific information. So we're going to talk about the budget process, few of the budget successes, the budget and fiscal strength coming into this year. I'm going to talk about what's driving the budget this year, briefly on revenue, wage, expense analysis, talk a little bit about next steps in the process, but most importantly, get to the questions of the Select Board, FinCom, and the public. So the first slide, and Carly, we're going to have a shared screen. And this presentation after tonight will be posted on the town's website. And I just, as we're getting this up, just want to stress, if you go to the town's website and type in FY24 budget, it will take you to the budget webpage where we're populating that page with all of the public documents and information related to the FY24 budget. If you see something, if you don't see something there or have any questions, please let us know, as we want to make sure that you get that information. So the first slide, Carly. The budget process and the budget calendar. And the budget calendar has been on the town website since the beginning of October, as it's set by the select board each year. We're right in January at the first budget presentation. The select board also opened the annual town meeting warrant at their meeting last Tuesday. And so we still, as you can see, through in February, we'll be developing the water and sewer rates. Some of the major budget drivers will begin to take shape. In March, union negotiations are completed. We'll have a second public forum. There'll be a public hearing on the water and sewer rates. The warrant will close on March 31st. And then you see in April, the select board will approve the warrant on April 4th. And we'll set the stage for annual town meeting on April the 24th. Next slide. So again, I'm pleased to report that we are coming into the FY24 budget process from a position of fiscal stability and financial strength. And this did not happen overnight. This has been years in the making. It is also a true testament to all of the town's departments, the town's management, support of the select board, the FinCom, all of our boards, committees, and commissions, volunteers, and residents. And it's an important theme because as we're coming out of the pandemic and in the age that we're in now, a lot of municipalities in Massachusetts are not in a strong fiscal position as they prepare for FY24. The certified free cash, we are awaiting state certification on and anticipate that for the beginning of February. The stabilization fund has a balance of over 2.6 billion currently. The capital stabilization balance is over 3.4 million. Our OPEB fund, our post-employment benefits, is over 4.1 million. And our recent Standard & Poor bond rating is AA2, which is a very stable outlook. And these specific third-party metrics point to a very strong economy, strong management with good financial policies and practice and healthy reserves. Next. So this shows you the stabilization fund balance starting back in 2000 all the way up to 2022. And you can see the town's ongoing commitment over the years to building up that stabilization fund. Just for everybody's benefit, the stabilization fund can only be accessed and used by a 2/3 vote of a town meeting. So this fund is not under any specific board or committee. It's not under the select board or the FinCom or the town manager or any department. It would require a true community effort to access through town meeting. Next. The Capital Stabilization Fund, again, going back to 2005, we started with that again, you can see specifically over the last 8 years, a commitment to ramp this up. Capital stabilization, like the stabilization fund, requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting to be accessed. And it is designed, the funding, for major capital projects or capital emergencies. One of the things that the select board over the last several years has publicly stated is an effort to begin to prepare to look at a new elementary school, for example, in building up these reserves. Next. So just want to highlight briefly some of the town of Ayer budget successes. And again, I want to say we would need multiple slides to talk about the successes of our departments, our boards and committees. A lot of work is done every day and every year to secure other resources outside of the budget for the town. A couple of highlights: the DPW got a $30,000 shared streets and spaces grant this year. Our unused tax levy capacity grew to 3.4 million in FY23. Our solar net metering agreement in FY22 has saved over $400,000 in energy costs. And since 2017, the town has received over $454,000 in grants from the Green Community designation for energy efficiency projects, another $61,255 in National Grid energy incentives, and over $400,000 in state 911 grants for the regional dispatch center, which is hosted and operated by the Town of Ayer Police Department. And there are many, many more that we could be here for a couple hours talking about. Next. So, summary of draft one of the omnibus budget. So this is draft one that was transmitted to the select board and the FinCom on January 13th. Has been on the town website at that time. I just want to, for everybody's benefit, so this is the initial draft. So what happens every year is I consult with the select board and the FinCom and others to develop a budget directive, which goes out to all of the departments at the beginning of December. And it asks them to generally prepare a level service funded budget. And to do that, they take the last year's budget, largely level funded. Of course, there are fixed costs and other costs that are going to increase. And we also ask them at this phase to put forth anything that they believe or that they need as the professionals for their department, with the understanding that from the starting point in draft one to town meeting, there could be changes and there are no guarantees of getting all of those things. And that's part of the process. So when we have draft one, I want to stress tonight, this is sort of the maximum budget request, if you will. It does not include the school assessments for the Ayer Shirley Regional School District or the Neshoba Valley Technical High School. The Neshoba Valley Technical High School will be releasing their budget and their information on Friday, February 3rd. And the Ayer Shirley Regional School District will be coming to a joint meeting of the Select Board and the FinCom as part of the February 7th Select Board meeting. So we're not going to really talk about the schools tonight. This does not include any union and non-union contracts. There is one union contract that negotiations are underway. That's for the Town Hall Clerical Union. And there are 3 personal service contracts for department heads that are under negotiation at this time. And generally this time of year in the process, we're in negotiations. This draft also does not include any cost of living adjustment for non-union personnel, the COLA recommendation, as we call it. That is made by the town manager to the select board, usually the end of February at their meeting, a recommendation that's based on a set of metrics in the town's financial policies. So what you have is a total budget for draft one at just over 18 million. It's an increase from last year, the FY23 budget of just over 1.2 million, or a percentage increase from last year of 7%. And we don't want to get caught up on the 7% because, as I mentioned, there's still a lot of work to do. For everybody's benefit, over the last 10 years, the average increase of the overall omnibus operating budget has been 4.7%. Next. So what are the major drivers in this budget? And what we use to define a driver is, in developing the budget outside of some of the contractual increases and so forth, what are the major items that are driving the increase in the budget? And the first one, and I want to talk a little bit about it, I have 2 slides on it, is our increased energy costs. And you'll see here, so of the $1.2 million increase in draft 1, $361,179 of those dollars are energy and fuel costs. And we'll get into that in just a minute. There are 2 new positions in this budget, or which the 1.5 FTE. FTE stands for full-time equivalent. There is a full-time administrative day sergeant position at the police department proposed in the budget. And we're proposing increasing the part-time building inspector and zoning code enforcement position to full-time. We introduced this last year as a part-time position to ramp up the zoning and code enforcement in the building department. We have found that this is easily a full-time position and full-time effort. And I know that the building commissioner will be meeting with the select board on February 7th to touch upon this as well. And we can touch upon this during the question period as well, meaning both of these positions. The Ayer Library budget request of $44,150. We do have our new library director, Luke Kirkland, is here tonight. If there's questions on that, there's been some reclassification of positions and some compensation and personnel adjustments in the library, as well as some increases in materials and so forth that are represented there. The town's tree management plan, which is on the town's website. This was introduced last year by the previous DPW superintendent, Mr. Wetzel. It's a 10-year management plan for the town's trees. Year 2 of that plan calls for $34,400, and the DPW director, Mr. Van Schalik, can speak to that under the questions. And then the DPW stormwater budget, there's about a $33,000 increase there that has to do with the increased cost for culvert replacements. As the board is aware, the town did create a stormwater enterprise, but there is no funding mechanism for that enterprise fund. So it's been a general fund subsidy, and I just wanted to point that out as another driver. But the main thing is energy and fuel, which we'll touch upon in just a moment. Next. So for FY24, and this isn't a complete surprise because I think everybody in their homes, businesses, private sector, public sector, costs as we move out of this pandemic, energy costs driven by inflation, supply chain, you name it, is sort of on the forefront. So as I mentioned, the energy and fuel cost increase is about $361,000 of the 1.2 million in increases. Or of that 7% I talked about earlier, 3% of that is just in energy and fuel. If we didn't have the 35% projected increase for the energy and fuel, the budget increase as it stands tonight in draft 1 would only be about $854,000 or 4% over last year. So what accounts for the energy increases? And I really want to thank the facilities director, Chuck Schultz, who is also here tonight. This is a main component of his job on energy efficiency and so forth for all of the work he's put into this, as well as the DPW director. So the big one is on the electrical. There is a 10% increase in delivery charges and an 80% increase in supply charges. And that's not, unfortunately, a full surprise as we saw with National Grid's increases back in November. The town is in the final year of a 3-year energy agreement with Constellation, which will expire in November of 2023. And this is the key driver. So currently, under the Constellation agreement, the town pays 9 cents a kilowatt hour We locked into this 3 years ago when energy was actually very low in the beginning of COVID. You may recall that the beginning of the pandemic, energy costs were far more optimal than they are now. Chuck has calculated, and this is an estimate, our agreement expires in November of 23. If we were to go with Constellation, it is estimated that the new agreement, it would be 16 cents a kilowatt hour. And I just want to stress, as the note says, currently under National Grid, the rate is 35 cents a kilowatt hour. So if we had not had the foresight with the support of the select board and the FinCom at the time to go into the Constellation agreement, rather than paying 9 cents, which we are now, we'd be paying close to 35 cents. As we look to go into another agreement, and that's a whole process, as we're looking forward to FY24, the estimate, the best case scenario would be 16 cents, which is still a 7-cent increase from the 9 cents. Also, there is an increase in electrical consumption projected for FY24 as well, partly driven by the adding of new facilities and new infrastructure. The situation on natural gas, very similar. There's a 10% increase in delivery charges and 80% in supply charges. We're currently paying 43 cents a therm under our agreement with Constellation, which also expires in November. It's estimated to be 85 cents under the new agreement. And it would be much higher if it was just under National Grid. And then on the fuel front, oil, gas, and diesel, the town pays the same increases the consumers pay since the pandemic ended. There's no question that there's inflation, supply issues, that oil, gas, and diesel have increased. So what do we do about this besides the reality that we have to prepare in the budget, hence the increase to operate the town? On the electric front, obviously we will want to renegotiate an optimal energy agreement for when our current agreement expires in November of 2023. And that's a whole process. Ultimately, the goal is to get the most favorable rate. We will review all electrical consumption for further opportunities for reduction and efficiencies, and implement further electric conservation measures. On the oil front, the main consumption of oil is used for 2 boilers at the wastewater treatment plant. These boilers actually date back to 1979. I want to thank Kimberly Abraham, our water and sewer superintendent, and Dan Van Schelwick, our DPW director, for identifying and putting a plan together to replace these. A proposal has been recommended by the Capital Planning Committee for funding to replace both of these boilers, subject to town meeting approval in April. And then on the gas and diesel front, implement further fuel conservation measures, for example, no idling, etc. Continue to research and consider electric vehicles when practical. And that is an ongoing process of departments. The challenge is, it sounds simple and easy, let's just get electric vehicles and so forth, but in many cases, there's issues of cost, issues of availability, or also issues that they're not practical for the particular work. But we are seeing improvements on that front, and some departments are beginning pilot program with electric vehicles. Next. So what are some of the efficiencies? So we talked about some of the drivers, some of the efficiencies in the budget. Obviously, this is year 2 of the SAFER grant for the Air Fire Department for the full-time personnel. There's a savings due to the grant of $106,223. On the pension assessment, which the town gets every year, you will recall that town meeting supported 2 cycles of forward funding our pension assessment using free cash. And it's only increasing by $38,425 this year. you can see on the slide that previously the increases were over 100,000. So there have been some savings there. Also by forward funding our pension assessment, we've realized and hope to realize more savings. The reserve fund had a balance of $300,000 in it since the pandemic started. The reserve fund, just for everyone's benefit, is a fund that requires authorization by the select board, as well as the FinCom in almost most cases. And this is a fund, obviously, when departments do their best on budgeting, emergencies and unforeseen issues happen, and there has to be a way to fund that. So we have this reserve fund. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, the fund historically had about 100 to 150,000 in it was sufficient. At the beginning of the pandemic, the select board, the FinCom, myself, and with the support of town meeting, increased it to 300,000 because we're in a great period of unknown as far as cost impacts. Looking at the history, I'm pleased to report we never hit the $300,000 ceiling on that. And looking at the spending access to the reserve fund over the last 3 cycles, we could easily reduce that to 200,000, which is what is in draft 1, so a savings of 100,000. And I would argue that as we prepare for draft 2, we could easily probably reduce that by another 50,000 based on the historical trends there. But I want to have more of a discussion with the FinCom and the select board on that. Town council, there's a $5,000 reduction. This is based on not only the history of the account, but also the current legal matters before the town. There's a small opportunity there. In the town clerk's office, obviously this upcoming year, there's not a presidential election and there are some fewer elections. So there's some savings there as well. Next. So just briefly on the revenue as we move forward in the process. So this graph shows you the principal source of revenue, obviously, for the town is the tax levy at over 28 million, or almost 85% of our revenue. State aid is just over $1 million at 3.1%. Local receipts, 7.5% at just 2.5 million. And then our free cash, 1.5 million is generally where we've ended up in the last several cycles. And this is a very conservative approach that we take on revenue initially, as put together by Barbara, but it's actually a pretty accurate guide, and the total revenue of 33.4 million, over 33.4 million. Next. So, as I've said many times, a municipality is actually in the service providing business. What we do is largely provide services to the public, whether that's public safety, public health, obviously education on the school side, recreation, senior programs. We do all kinds of things. So but to do that, it really requires human capital. And any municipality wants to hire the most qualified candidates. We also want to be competitive in the marketplace for the most qualified candidates. And we also want to retain our professional personnel and also further invest in them. So the largest thing in the whole budget, if you will, it really comes down to personnel. And this shows you a breakdown of the categories. So police and fire, public safety, 59%, DPW, 13.2%, human services, 2.6%, culture and recreation, 7%, and then the general government, sort of think of sort of town hall, 17%, is just a high overview of wage breakdown. Next. And here on the budget, if you look at the expense analysis, as I've mentioned, 48%, almost half of the budget is for wages. Then there are benefits, employee benefits is another 26%. Debt, and this is debt on our various projects and so forth, about 6%. And then other expenses at 18%. Other expenses, supplies, chemicals, fuel, equipment, and so forth. Next. So our next steps in the process is myself and Barbara, the finance manager, and the assistant town manager, Carly, along with the department heads, will continue to meet to refine draft one. The term that Ms. Cabri used to use, the previous finance manager, is to scrub the budget. There's in this draft one budget, there are numbers, for example, for health insurance and some of the insurance lines that we have to use placeholder assumptions until we get the actual numbers later in the process. So for example, draft one has a 15% increase on health insurance. We're cautiously optimistic it will actually come in at 10%, so the budget will need to be adjusted. Hopefully it doesn't swing the other way. So we will continue to refine draft one into a draft two. Well, also, I will be giving updates on the budget under my report to the select board. And I know that the FinCom is looking to meet with departments and look at some of the different topics as we move forward. The Neshoba Valley Technical High School budget and their assessment will come out February 3rd, and we will populate that onto the budget page. As I mentioned, the Ayer Shirley Regional School District will come on February 7th at 6. That's a joint meeting of the Select Board and FinCom to present the school budget and their assessment. I anticipate the union contract and the non-union contracts to conclude by the end of February, early March at the latest. We're scheduled to do a second forum where we talk about other topics such as use of free cash. We take a brief look at capital, enterprise funds, and so forth on March 8th at 6 p.m. The select board will have a public hearing on setting the water and sewer rates in March. And then, as I mentioned, the select board will approve the warrant on April 4th, and then town meeting will take place on April 24th. And during this is oversimplified, but also the capital planning committee has been meeting since November regarding the town's capital. The rate review committee that oversees the water and sewer rates has been meeting since the fall. The executive buy board that is an advisory board on budget and finance matters has been meeting throughout the year. So there is a lot of pieces in that. So lastly, and I appreciate the opportunity to present the information, questions and further information. I want to stress this is a picture of that budget page. So the FY24 budget page, you click on that, you can find the budget calendar. There's draft one of the budget. There's the capital requests, presentations. This presentation will be populated there. So for more information, you can visit here. Also, all of this information is also available from the Select Board Town Manager's office in hard copy upon request. If you have any questions, please contact myself or Ms. Antonellis or Ms. Tierney, the Finance Manager, or our department heads. If you have questions, you want information and so forth, that's what we want you to have so that you can make informed decisions. And then we're going to have a second forum like this on March 8th. We moved it up a little earlier before we get into town meeting, at which point we'll have a much more refined budget as we do every year at that time. And so, Madam Chair, I know that was a lot in a quick snapshot. I want to thank you, the Select Board, the FinCom, for the opportunity to present this tonight. It is just an overview of some of the major things at this point in the process. And myself, Ms. Tierney, and the departments are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Robert. Thank you. So before we get to public input, are there any questions or comments from any member of the select board or the finance committee? Okay, does not appear so. All right, Dennis.
Yeah, if you could, I guess the wages and salary, where does the school, the slide you showed, like second to last, third to last slide on the wages and salary? I'm not sure, where does yeah, there you go. Where does the school wages and salary fit into that, if at all?
So through the chair, so Dennis, and good evening. So this is just looking at the town's operating omnibus budget. So that wage breakdown is just based on the town side. On February 7th, the superintendent will present their budget, which will also be available to the public, and a presentation as they're funded by an assessment through town meeting.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay. Is there anybody else? All right. So I don't see where anyone else has any questions.
if I can make a comment,
Yes,
Chair. When it comes to the school budget, and that's actually a common question that Mr. Curran had that is presented at town meeting. And perhaps we can help to get that information out, that any questions on the school budget, which is definitely includes wages and so forth. That's when I would encourage members of the public to follow the school committee, follow their agendas, and participate in their budget process. It's a school district, so it's separate from the towns. And year after year, folks will get up and inquire about the teacher salaries or the wages and so forth. But that's discussed with the school. So I would encourage anybody to follow the school district and their agendas and to follow their budget process. So I just wanted to make that comment to help if anybody had questions on it.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks for that, Susan.
You're welcome.
Oh, and could I don't know if this is, I don't know if anybody can see it, and this is, kind of a little off topic, but how many, if you can see, how many non-town employees, non-committee members from the public are on this call right now? I suspect the number is small, which, I think everybody would be disappointed in, but I can't really tell.
I can't really tell as far as, I can see a few, but
So we're talking
Pauline's
about,
there. Pauline has her hand up.
no, I'm sure, but we're talking
No,
like
but I would
about
like to find
dozens,
out
so.
what Pauline like to ask. Yes, Pauline?
I'd just share maybe less than 5, Dennis.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I
didn't
said
hear that.
maybe less than 5.
Less than 5. Okay, all right, thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously that
come
would
here.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I've been posting at 10 different places all day. And if we have 5 people, I'd be surprised.
Okay, all right. No, I understand.
That's it.
So that's about average what we've had the last couple of years as far as the attendance. But it's on video, so people do get to watch it and find out what's going on. So anybody else have any questions or comments? Well, if there's nothing else, then does the finance committee, I turn it over to you as to adjournment.
Yeah. Hi, this is Kurt Fraskowski. I want to thank Robert for a very nice presentation, and also thank Robert and Carly for all their help in helping our group learn about the budget in the town. They've done a very nice job. I'd like to say thank you for that. Having said that, I believe I've.
Well, excuse me, could I? Hi, I'm sorry, there you go. And were there going to be time for questions to the various department heads about their requests, or does that come at the March 8th?
Well, that came under
report?
public input and nobody else had any questions. So public input is questions or input on this presentation.
Well, no, I understand, but I thought it was on Robert's presentation and that the department heads would then, or does that happen on the March?
Well, do you have a question?
I do, yeah.
Well, then this would be a time to ask it.
Okay, all right. Sorry that I misunderstood the nature of the meeting, but so I mean, my first question would be for the police, for Chief Gill, and obviously personnel is a substantial part of the town budget, as Robert pointed out. So I was just wondering, why do you feel, or what do you feel is necessary that a new community sergeant administrative position be created?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Great. Very good question, Mr. Curran. And I can answer that. It's kind of best done with a quick presentation that I made to help kind of explain where we're coming from. And through the, well, are we under the FinCom or are we under the board at this point? I know that we've moved on, so who do I need to address?
So, Madam Chair, Robert, the town manager, Chief Gill just has, I believe, a slide or two related to the administrative sergeant request.
Yep, that's good.
Go ahead, Chief.
And I just got to share the screen. Hold on. My screen isn't set up for sharing. Can that get done on the fly?
Cindy?
I do have screen sharing on, Brian.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Let me turn it off and turn it back on then.
I just tried it, Cindy.
Try it again.
Let's see, it's going to be that. Can anybody see it yet? How about now?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's coming up.
There it is.
Yeah.
All right. So part of the Ayer Police Department, we're a service-based industry, as we kind of alluded to a little bit earlier. And in a service-based industry, customer is number one. And at the police department, we believe that that's the same for everybody within the town of Ayer, that the customer should be number one. The business of policing isn't static. It kind of goes with the times. It goes with public sentiment. And successful agencies like us are in constant evolution to best serve the community of Ayer. We're very proud of our community connections. In my 28-year career here with the Ayer Police Department, we've gone from policing the town to policing in synergism with the town, with the community itself. Our connections with the community doesn't end or begin with answering 911 calls. We're constantly trying to identify ways to engage with the community in ways that best meet the community needs. And by being engaged, we're available to the community. We can learn about issues. Go to the next slide. Is it moving for anybody? There we are. So many people don't know our current organizational structure, which you can see here. It kind of breaks down from the chief of police and branches off in different directions. So out of the administrative functions, we have the chief of police, the deputy, the office manager, the records clerk, and the animal control. The communication center is another faction. We have a communications manager and 9 dispatchers. We have a special services section that consists of the detective and the SRO. And then we have our patrol staff. And those are on the bottom of the chart that you see here. And we have 3 shifts, a day shift, an evening shift, and an overnight shift. And each one of those is led by a sergeant. And on each shift right now, we have 4 officers assigned to each of those shifts. We also have a 4th sergeant. It's called the swing sergeant. And that sergeant is designed to fill in on the days off of the other sergeants. One thing to note about the organizational structure here, you see the 4 sergeants under each shift. That doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, the 4 officers. It doesn't necessarily mean you have 4 officers working and a sergeant. The 4 officers are necessary to make sure that we're taking care of days off, time off, and to account for the shift rotation. So in 2020, Massachusetts passed what's called what we call police reform. It's part of the Chapter 253 of the Acts of 2020. And in that, many new requirements were given to the police departments in ways to conduct their business all the time. So what transpired out of that was a lot of changes, and most of those changes are administrative function requirements. Policy maintenance updates, hiring, completely different way to hire, different training requirements, and different training requirement documentation. Complaint investigations and resolutions. It was a major change in how that's processed, and the year-to-year recertification of officers. One of the other big things that happened was in 2022, we became accredited. And what that is in 2019, we voluntarily embarked on the process to become accredited, which means that we are striving to achieve the most professional level of service that we can to the community. And what that means is the professional level of service, we are meeting national standards of best practices. And this ensures that the town of Ayer, through its police department, is receiving the best police services that can be offered. Another change that happened that is part of the decision to move forward in this direction is we've experienced population growth. In population from the 2010 to 2020, we increased about 1,000 residents, but that's not the whole story. This whole area has kind of grown, and that has some traffic impacts, which also means that there's more, community interaction in the ways of traffic enforcement and complaints that we receive. And we also started in 2019 to experience a spate of retirements. We went in that very, very short period of time, experienced 5 retirements and 1 transfer. And as of this moment, that means 46 of our patrol officers have under 2 years of experience at the Ayer Police Department.
I'm sorry, Chief, did you say 46%?
46%, yes.
Okay.
So 46% of our people here,
Yeah.
patrol officers, are under 2 years experience in the Ayer Police Department.
No, I understand. Thank you.
Okay. So some upcoming changes. The Massachusetts police reform mandates, they're ongoing and they're continued. The yearly certification of officers, the maintenance of the complaint system, maintenance of the training requirements, and the policy development and maintenance requirements as a result of this one, that one portion. The Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission, we're moving from a standard, from standards that were set 10 years ago to brand new standards. And that's from 2022. Maintenance of either of those versions in some agencies is a full-time job. But right now, we kind of spread that out among several members of our department. And the deputy chief Bigelow she's going to be taking care of the transition to the new version of standards. Population growth. It's we're not expecting that to slow down. There are different plans on various tables, and we expect continued growth there. We also expect more retirements. By July 1, 2023, 57% of the police force is going to be under 2 years on the Air Police Department. And then the final point, and it's one of the a bigger point, is the adoption of body-worn cameras at the Air Police Department. There's a statewide shift to move to body-worn cameras, and we expect the management of this program to be quite extensive.
Okay, and could and then I was trying to look at how many uniformed police
think
officers?
if I could just finish this,
Sure, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
How we got to requesting this administrative sergeant.
Okay.
So the business of policing has become highly technical and administrative. By adding this administratively focused sergeant, I strongly believe that we'll be in a better position to offer the highest level of police services to the community. Sorry about that. I lost my train of thought. Here we go. All right. So one of the big things is by bringing on this administrative day sergeant, and we're going to flash back to that organizational chart. That day sergeant that we have supervising those officers very rarely gets a chance to go out on the road and supervise on the road. And this is crucial for the agency. It's crucial for the employees that are out on the road, those officers, to have supervision so they can get their questions answered, and for the town as a whole, because the supervision of the police officers is something that is required, and it's something that the town deserves to have. We'll also experience, I guess, in addition to the day shift personnel in the field, this officer's been pretty much in the station taking care of administrative business, the sergeant, well, for as long as I've been here as a sergeant. So that would actually, it would be like experiencing an additional officer out on the road. Would also free up other personnel. So as I mentioned in the earlier presentation, that mandates have come down and become the responsibility of the police department. What as these came down, we kind of spread them out amongst people to say, all right, you can do this, you can do that. By bringing on this administrative sergeant and assigning some of those duties, we can keep some of the personnel focused on their primary duties of what they were what they were originally brought on for. And lastly, ensuring that the police reform mandates and accreditation requirements are met. Next to achieving the proper supervision, but just as important and goes hand in hand with, is ensuring that the police reform mandates and accreditation requirements are met. Both police reform mandates and accreditation requirements not only ensure the high level of professional police service, but also instills the high level of confidence from within the community. Though being an accredited agency is voluntary, it's highly recommended by police reform mandates and by insurance policies. And just some final thoughts. So coming to the town and asking for this additional position, I don't take lightly. It's something that that agencies had as 2000 in 2020 as things started to evolve for police departments across the country and in Massachusetts, that that agencies brought on additional staff to kind of take and be a buffer to these additional duties coming in. I wanted to hold off on that, and I wanted to be sure that if I did have to ask for this position, I could have some data. I could have something to bring to the town to say, this is why, not just, we think there's going to be a lot more work. After almost 2 years in the position now, I know that there's more work, and I know that this administrative sergeant is something that is a necessity really for the town. The original plan was to come in with a position that was higher, a lieutenant, but knowing that the request was going to be high enough, I tried to find ways to mitigate that, and one of those was to bring the request to a lower rank, and we also embarked on looking at and knowing that this was a big ask for the town to do. We really took a look at our budget to find areas that we were able to look at to defray the impact of this, and we think we've made a really great start at finding those areas, and we're confident that that we're doing the best for the town's pocketbook on this. So hopefully that answers some questions.
No, I fully appreciate, and I hear your constructive thoughts about trying to do what's obviously in best for the community. So with the new sergeant, how many uniformed officers would the Air Police Department have, including the new position? I was trying to add it up. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. So that would be 21. So
Okay.
that would be myself down.
Sure. All right. I appreciate your explanation, and it sounds like a pretty constructive thing to do for me.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, does not look like.
I've got another one.
Nope. You got it. Well, of course.
No, it's
Go ahead, Dennis. Go ahead.
And again, I don't. It's fine. All right. So
No,
so
ask your question. No, ask
All
your
right.
question.
So my next question is for Chief Johnston regarding the overtime, the 12% increase in overtime, contracted overtime for the fire department. Was that, and maybe Robert would answer this, was that contract entered into before or after the 4 additional firefighters were hired as a result of the SAFER grant?
Madam Chair, I can answer that if you like.
Yes.
Chief Johnston. Good evening, Mr. Curran. That contract was signed, I believe, a year ago, correct, Robert? So that would have been prior to the annual town meeting last year.
I'm just verifying, Chief. Sorry. Correct.
Yeah, that would have been as of July 1st. That contract was signed probably earlier in the year, Mr. Pomperian?
Yes.
Yep, and funded at the annual town meeting.
And the reason I ask, obviously, is that with the new, there have been 5 full-time positions hired into the fire department in the last 3 years, I believe. The 4 as a result of the SAFER grant, and then the deputy chief, which occurred, I think, a year prior.
Yeah, Chief Pedrazi was still the fire chief when the deputy position was created.
Right, I think he had just retired or was just about to retire.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering why it is that we would need to increase our overtime budget by 12%. after increasing the full-time staffing budget by 33%, which is, we went from 14 full-time fire employees to 19 full-time fire. And I understand that the SAFER grant, obviously federal funding is covering those first 3 years. But in the fourth year, in those outlying years, the town, I assume, is going to be on the hook for the whole shebang.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
Mr. Curran, so the way the overtime is driven, so their overtime rate is all driven by any potential credentialing or certifications or higher education. So what you're going to find is of late, many of them have been taking classes. Most people here at minimum have an associate's degree. Many have bachelor's, and many will be completing, for this year, would be completing their master's degree. So contractually, they have a percentage increase that they will do, and that's a driver to the average overtime rate. And those are all averages. We work, as I look at the overtime breakdown, sick time is based on averages, holidays work, training days. We have refresher course requirements, whether they're a paramedic or a EMT. So that overtime is all driven by the number of employees by an average overtime rate. And that's how we come up with the overtime budget. I'd be happy to sit down with you and show you the breakdown.
No, again, and this is obviously a concern that I've raised previously. And it just continues to trouble me. So in terms of paying the overtime, is there any way to calculate how much of that overtime is driven by the mutual aid that is provided out of town? That is, because we are servicing, and again, ballpark figure, about 35% of ambulance calls, I think, or perhaps all calls, but ambulance calls are out of town. That may well lead to increased overtime in order to service calls that don't involve the town of Ayer.
Madam Chair?
yes, go ahead.
I would tell you this, Mr. Curran, that the bulk of the mutual aid calls are handled by the on-duty crew, so it's no additional cost. Are there times that we both go, say, double medicals and we need station coverage? Absolutely, but I couldn't break it down to say whether one ambulance is ALS or one's in town or they're both in town. And the same thing goes along with when we provide mutual aid, we backfill the station, so there is an overtime cost. But that has never driven up what the overtime budget is. For the most part, ALS calls are done by the on-duty crew, which is just their hourly wages, which of course is built into the budget.
Okay, and finally, and I appreciate you taking the time. And finally, have you had any conversations with your counterparts in Harvard, Shirley, Groton, Devens, and encouraged them, asked them to petition their towns to increase funding for their emergency services so that the town of Ayer does not have to continue, and the town of Ayer's taxpayers do not have to continue providing emergency services for those towns?
Madam Chair?
Yes,
As I reported when the select board had asked me to, after the annual town meeting last year, and we had 2 reports given to the select board, I did reach out when the selectmen had reached me to both on the state and local level, whether there is anybody else that would be, say, getting into the ALS service or whether we would have any relief. Of course, I have reached to some of them, but I can't speak for what their town is thinking. But of course, they understand that we do respond for their towns. One of our bordering towns foresees it, but not in the next year or two. And 2 of them don't have an answer quite yet.
Okay, appreciate your time, Chief.
You're welcome.
all right, so I don't see anybody else. Dennis, you still have your hand up? Did you have
I'm
anything
sorry.
else?
Okay, and one more.
Yep. Dennis, you're asking good questions.
For the assistant building inspector, well, I guess for Charlie, the building inspector, what will what will the person be doing with their extra 50% of the time? That's number one. And secondly, obviously, it's apparent that we have had a tremendous building boom over the last 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years, and that there's been a need for increased inspections. And obviously publicly, we all know that I have been deeply concerned about zoning enforcement. And I do appreciate, I have looked at some of the monthly reports from the assistant building inspector regarding zoning enforcement, and it is certainly nice to see that being done. But if there is we may well anticipate a slowdown in construction, and the building boom may well end. What would that do to the need for 2 full-time building inspectors?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I'll
Who's
start
talking?
with giving you some,
It's Charlie.
this is
Schultz.
Charlie,
Okay.
Building Commissioner. I'll start with first by giving you some numbers, Dennis. When I took over in 2018, I conducted a review for a fee evaluation. So I did a 10-year span of averages, and the town was at an average of 265 permits a year, with a high of 353 and a low of 186. And the average fee was 152,000 and a high of 227 and a low of 111,000 in permit fees. And for this budget round here, I went from 2019 to 2022, which was the last 4 years. And our average permits are 389. Our high is 503 this year. Our low is 305. Our average department fees are 310,000 with a high of 423 and a low of 204, and that included the first year of COVID. Furthermore, let me get back to your second question. So with the 20-hour individual to do zoning and myself, I've calculated out the hours it takes to run our office out of a business administration book for building departments. And I am negative 331 hours just to run the basic office myself. And that doesn't include any of the assistants hours. It does not include any meetings, any public or ABC inspections, any zoning, review, complaints, decisions, violations, court prep time, going to court. So that's what the individual would do. That would be if he gets the other 20 hours. And you were speaking about if we're going to die down soon. Upcoming, we have across from the high school Panther Place with 22 units. Shaker Road has 14 units still in construction. Wright Road is another subdivision by Dave Moulton with 25 plus units. We have a 40B that's already been through the ZBA. That's 110 units. We have 201 West Main Street that is in progress with commercial below and another 100 units. The Sawyer's looking to do a 50,000 square foot addition. Katana Oil is doing a mezzanine and another tank farm. 97 Fitchburg Road is doing propane tanks and delivery. Shop and Save is proposing 4 new commercial spots. Anticipated revenue for those projects that are either in progress or in the processing stage is approximately, I don't like to do this, but almost $1 million in fees to the building department for this year alone. Along with all those projects, that are projected, I don't have time to do building commissioner work, zoning, and inspections and serve the public properly.
Okay.
So I guess the fear of the housing slowdown is is significantly overblown.
We may, the new units may decrease, but I have more numbers if you want to hear them. I'm a
No,
numbers
no,
man.
no, no, no.
but
I mean,
I
I
just-
appreciate you taking the time to explain that. That is certainly sufficient. Okay, all right. Thanks, Charlie.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right, I don't see anybody with their hand up. Dennis, do you have any more questions?
No,
No, Dennis,
I'm
you've
done.
asked some good questions.
I'm
You
done,
have.
Janice. All right, thanks very much.
All right, then. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, I'll turn it back over to the FinCom chair.
Hi, Madam Chair, I would motion and correct this if I'm doing this wrong. It's my first time doing this, to adjourn.
So you'll request someone to make the motion. Yes.
So moved.
I move.
And our committee all votes to adjourn?
Yeah, I.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And aye. All four vote aye.
All right. FinCom's adjourned. With that, I'll take a motion for adjournment from the select board.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to adjourn the select board at 7:15 PM, please.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Sean?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.